that's the most outstanding in my mind. That is the first time that I was ever acquainted with the union, or what they stood for, or what they meant, or anything like that. And this was in Canada, at Winnipeg. And when I hit Winnipeg, they had a general strike. You know what a general strike is? Whole cotton picking thing was out. We just got out of the train to look around. Boy, I had a straw hat on, and somebody knocked that straw hat galley east and galley west. You know, I was fairly dressed up and with a straw hat on, and I'm supposed to be a striker. I'm not supposed to be duding around. Well, I crawled back in that train so fast that you couldn't see me, and I watched everything out the window. But they did let us leave. We were tied up there for about 2 hours, and then they let the train go on again. We could witness from the train there. I was with another boy by the name of Cliff Goulin. And they would take, everything was horse and buggy those days. There was very few automobiles. And they would just take a team and strip the harness off the team and drop the harness wherever it was. And take the wagon, whether it was a milk wagon, a coal truck, or anything that was moving. They stopped it. And I saw one milk wagon there loaded with milk. And they stripped the harness off of that and turned the wagon around, got a hold of the shafts, and they took a run and let go of it. And going down the river, you know, downhill, and that thing went rattly-bang over them cobblestones and piled into that river, and you never saw such a white foam fly up out of a river. That was the old Red River there at Winnipeg. But the whole town was out. Stores were all closed. There was just nothing. I have never, to this day, I've never found out what triggered the strike in the first place. Well, it was in August of 1919. You can back and check the records anytime you like. And that was the first strike, or general strike, that I ever seen or ever had anything to do with that in 1919. Well, then we went on through. After they let us go from there, left Winnipeg, we went on through to Regina. I got off the train at Regina, and I had to go back 4 miles to a town by the name of Sutherland. And that was the roundhouse and where you hired out as a brakeman on the CPR. So I went back to Sutherland, and I hired out there. And that was one of the most interesting jobs I ever had. We'd line up with maybe 65 or 70 empties and head out of Regina, and well, out of Sutherland, I should say. I'm saying Regina because a lot of people, Sutherland now is just a suburb of Regina. We'd head out of Regina with a train like that, and then scatter these empty boxcars all along, just like leaving them out in the field someplace. There wasn't a tree or a house or a bush, just a siding. You'd pull in and leave them there. And we went on as far as the CPR went north, all the way up to Cutknife, what they called Cutknife in Saskatchewan. There was, there was Royston was a little town we went through. There was Unity, Rockhaven, and Cutknife, where you could stop and buy a steak or anything like that, you know, or buy some groceries, loaf of bread or whatever you needed. Well, we'd go from the caboose up to the locomotive, you know. You could walk over top and then come on down through with your steak, and you'd take the old fire shovel that they shovel coal with. You got a handful of sand out of the sand dune. You know, that big hopper up on top of the locomotive, where the whistle is and the steam dome. Well, that's a sandbox in there, and they keep that sand just red hot and dry, and that comes down in tubes and scatters sand on the rail to give you traction if you've got a heavy load or get starting, or if you happen to have a flood of grasshoppers all over the track and they grease the rail for you, you know. Well, you have to have this hot sand in there, or else your wheels will just go zoo, 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 you know. So we'd get a handful of sand out of there and scrub that old fire shovel. And that's all you did. No water, just scrub her with sand and get everything off of it. And it would come clean with the sand. And of course you always had wiping rags. That's what you used, wiping rags was, oh, they'd have a bin full of wiping rags, and before you went out, why, you grabbed these rags and put them in your pocket. You used them for a lot of things, believe me, when you're trapped out like that. And then you'd wipe the sand off your shovel. Well, in fact, you took the rag with the sand and polished the shovel, and then throw a chunk of fat on there and stick it in the firebox there, you know, get that shovel come out almost red hot. Drop a steak on there and burn it on both sides, you know, and eat it. And oh, was that stuff ever good, you know? You didn't waste any of the juice. That old fire shovel was so hot, and that bed of coals in there. And you just put that in there like that, and you had a 3-minute steak. I'll tell you. Talk about electrocuting a steak. You could electrocute it in that firebox. And then when we'd leave Cutknife, you see, by the time we get back, believe it or not, they would have those boxcars all loaded with wheat. That's what a wheat growing district it was, you know, and there'd be, you could look out across to the horizon, and you could probably see smoke in the air from as many as 25 or 30. At that time it was all steam engines, you know. The gas engine hadn't come in yet in 1919. They didn't come in until about 1921. A couple of years later they started getting the big case gasoline power plants, tractors they called them, and traction engines is what they called them, because they would pull your separator around from place to place. And they thrash right in the field. You know, around Michigan and Ontario in the east here, everything was pulled into the barn under cover, and then you thrashed it when you got to it. Out there was no barns, you just thrashed it right out of the field. So they'd blow these huge stacks here, and as soon as they thrashed around there, instead of hauling the grain up like you do on the farm here, you got to haul the grain. If it's clear at the other end of the farm, you got to bring it up to the barn. There they just pull the separator out and blow another pile of straw there and thrash right there, so that all they had to transport was the grain. Again, that was horse and wagon. And so you'd have maybe 4 teams hauling from there over to the boxcar. And that was all shoveled by hand. Take that whole load of wheat, you know, and you'd probably have 75 or 100 bushels of wheat there. And take that over to the boxcar there, and then that all had to be shoveled off. You'd see the other team coming. You'd have to get out of his way, so you just shovel like the place was on fire, because once you got it shoveled off, you didn't have anything to do, only sit there and ride all the way back to the separator again. But those few minutes that you worked unloading that, you worked. And I really enjoyed every minute of that, and I got so that I found out the faster I worked, the longer I could sit. And believe it or not, I also experienced that same thing. I found out that you can get more out of a man for 10 minutes to sit on his bottom than you can if you pay him another $1. That's right. Give him 10 minutes where he can roll a cigarette and sit down, and he'll work like hell for it. But you can offer him another $1 a day to do this or that, and okay, it's just another day. And that wasn't just 1 or 2 guys. That was fundamentally all the way. I would have stayed there. I enjoyed that so much that I thought I'd stay there until we went to bed one night and got up the next morning, and there was all across these stooks and up against the railroad cars and everything. There was snow a foot deep piled up on everything. And then it turned cold. And when it turned cold out there, mister, it turns cold. They can say, well, you don't feel it like you do around here. Don't tell me you don't feel it when there's nothing but prairie as far as you can see in every direction. The old boxcars would feel it then, where you'd have a train of maybe 60 or 70 cars. The old locomotive couldn't move because the rail was all frosty and everything too, you know, and you couldn't get traction. So get out and wade through that snow and go down and cut off maybe 10, 12 cars and move them till you got the oil loosened up in the journal box. And then you go back and hook on to maybe 6 or 7 more or whatever you could handle. We generally try 20 or 25, and if he couldn't pull them, well, then he'd stick his head out in the wind and yell like mad because we used to call them hoggers, because they wanted everything their way, and they're sitting in there where it's nice and warm up against that old fire pot, and here you are out freezing everything you got. There was always a little friction between the two like that, but that's only while you was on the job. Once you was off the job, well, you was a pretty good job. So that cured me after I got a taste of that, for a couple of weeks. I gave it up and came on back home. But it still lingered in my mind, and I still hungered for that enough that I went back and tried it again in 1921. But just that 2-year period there, things have changed radically, and the people that I thought I knew when I went back in 1919, they're entirely different. They've either sold out or lost out, or they've got married, or something, just in a 2-year period.
Was there any technological change?
No, it was principally if you had a bad year. If you had a couple of bad years in a row where you didn't have water-feed grain and all that, or if you had a terrific freeze and froze your wheat before it came and you only had a half a crop, they went under. In those days, or if you saw you were going to go under, you got out with what you could get instead of waiting until you didn't have a penny left. Well, I can't make it this year. It's too big a gamble. I better get out to what I got and make a start someplace else. Now today they have all kinds of these government agencies set up, to help situations like that. And the farmers themselves are organized to the point where they help each other. Hell, those days, Dan, you were on your own. You either paid it or you went down the tubes. And about the best you get is, well, it's too bad, but nothing we can do about it. We got all we can do to look after ourselves. Yeah, that was true. It was quite true. I've been on both sides of the fence. I thank heaven that May and I are pretty well independent now, but I'll tell you, there's been times when we were damn dependent. After I decided railroad wasn't for me, one of the boys I worked with